Welcome back to another virtual tasting with Binny's. I am Pat from the Whiskey Hotline, along with Brett and our friends Charlie and Andy Nelson from the Nelson's Green Brier Distillery. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Everybody else who's here to taste along with us, thank you for joining us. These are a lot of fun, and we got a pretty cool story here today. It's we're talking about one whiskey, but there's a lot more to it than that. So, Charlie or Andy, you kind of want to start us off here. What's the story behind this? Because this is not a new brand, right?
Yeah. So I'll just start out and tell a little bit. I mean, first of all, thanks for having us on, and we're really excited. I mean, it's been way too long. I can't wait to get back into Chicago and hang out and run around a little bit. Yeah, so Nelson's Green Brier Distillery was started by Andy and I, our brothers. It was started by our great grandfather. And there's a long story behind it. We can go into the history in more detail if you'd like, but the long story short is Charles Nelson was one of the first to bottle and sell whiskey rather than selling by the barrel or the jug, produced the original Tennessee whiskey, which was almost exactly the same as this label. I've actually, I might bring out an old original ad in a minute, but we're using that original recipe and everything. He shut down because of statewide prohibition in Tennessee in 1909. And Andy and I brought it back to life after working on the whole project for about 15 years. We discovered our family's history and the distillery. We discovered it in 2006 with our dad on our way to buy a quarter of a cow worth of meat from a butcher who happened to live on part of the land.
Now, was this something that was talked about in your family for generations? I mean, it was like, you didn't just like stumble upon an old billboard and be like, wow, we used to make whiskey.
Well, so got to answer a couple questions. First, the butcher was Chuck Grissom, who was a monster of a man, a big guy. His like torso, or his calves rather, were like the size of my torso. And he was great. So sorry, Andy.
Hey, I'm just here to watch.
Well, we were on our way to, we didn't, well, Andy, do you want to say what we knew about it beforehand?
Sure, yeah. So when we grew up, the earliest memory I have of hearing anything about it was probably about 6 or 7 years old at the dinner table, like on Christmas Eve, and hearing Dad at the end of the table talking about this, this kind of family lore of someone back in our family falling off a boat on the way to America with the family fortune in gold sewn into his clothing. And it was kind of, as a 7-year-old, I knew basically what I picked up on was that Dad was a good storyteller and he liked telling stories, and Mom would tease him because she would always invoke the idea of like Dad going by the philosophy of never letting the truth get in the way of a good story. And so as a 7-year-old, I took that literally, that he would like embellish everything. And so I didn't actually believe the story. And I was just like, well, Mom teases him about it, so that's what it is. And then further, we had heard some sort of rumblings of there being some sort of whiskey thing in Green Brier, Tennessee. Now, at that point, we didn't know where Green Brier was or is, and we didn't know if it was like a business or a big, just a moonshine operation or what. So that's kind of we heard a bit of the story, didn't believe it, heard that there was some sort of operation in Green Brier, knew even less about that. So Charlie, pick it up from there. That's kind of the context of it.
Yeah, and I'm a year and a half younger than Andy, so I remember hearing the story of our family coming over from Germany and the gold, but I don't remember hearing anything about the whiskey business. Our dad said that when he was a kid, he remembers his dad and his uncles and stuff being at like family reunions saying, if we could just find that old spring, we could bring back the family business. And he didn't really know what that meant. But so in 2006, Andy's fresh out of college. I still have a semester of college left. And our dad invites us to go with him to pick up a quarter of a cow worth of meat from a butcher. So I'm in Nashville working during the summer. of 2006. And so we're on our way to this butcher. We're running low on fuel. We stop to fill up. And at the gas station, there's this historical marker that says Nelson's Green Brier Distillery, 1 mile east on Long Branch Road. Charles Nelson opened the Green Brier Distillery. And actually, another brother of ours, Sean, he had these made for us. This is actually a recreation of that historical marker. It's hard to read, obviously, but so we're like, holy crap, that's crazy. What is this? We go on to the butcher, happens to live a mile east. We ask him if he knows anything about the old distillery. He's like, well, hell, look across the street. We do see this old barrel warehouse still standing, which I don't know if you guys can see that. That's a pencil drawing of that old barrel warehouse. It's still standing. The original spring is still running. We drank from the spring, and then he sent us to a nearby historical society where there were 2 original bottles almost exactly like this with our name on them. And like every hair on my body stood up. Andy and I looked at each other and we're just like, holy shit, this is what we're here to do. And so we've been working on resurrecting the company ever since.
Did your dad spend the rest of his time driving around with 1/8 of a tank of gas? Because it sounds like that's the fortuitous part of it, right? Is all of a sudden you're running out of gas. You only know this because you're running out of gas.
That's his lucky charm. Old 1/8 of a tank Bill, they call him.
Yeah, it's funny. We've got a picture. I think we've taken it off of all the collateral that we have, but we took a picture that day, and Andy and I looked just like dum-dums sitting, we're standing by that old historical marker. And anyway, we definitely looked a lot younger and just like
college,
silly, but
college bros for sure.
Yeah.
Wow, man. So, I mean, we've been doing business with you for quite a while now, and it was more of the business started back up as a sourced whiskey operation. You're obviously bottling the Bellmead bourbon and all that. What was the thought with trying to get back to this original Tennessee whiskey now? And forgive my skepticism, but you mentioned that you're using the original recipe. And if the family distillery was so lost to time, how did you manage to pull that one off?
Yeah.
Well, I'll take this one.
Okay. We have to fight each other to answer the questions sometimes.
Right.
So
Fred and I just talk over each other. It's a lot easier that way.
That's normally what we do, yeah.
I've already lost the first question that you asked. I've forgotten it, but about the okay. So the original plan when we kind of figured all this out and stumbled upon this history was like, okay, what we're going to do is raise a bunch of money, build a distillery, and lay down barrels for a few years before we start selling it, and that's when we'll make our money. So as Charlie said, we were just out of college, or he still wasn't even out of college yet when we discovered this. So he graduates, we put together a business plan. We do, and this is over the course of 2 and 3 years, by the way, like putting together the business plan. For a little extra context, like Charlie took a business class in that last semester. I still never taken a business or finance class in my life. So we're just kind of like learning. Our dad, has started businesses before, so he helped us out a whole lot. But that was kind of the naive position we were coming from. And we figured it would be easy to raise money with a cool story like this, right? Well, it turns out the story was cool, but our lack of experience and knowledge was a big hindrance to our success in here. And so no one would give us any money. And they said, that's a cool story, but like, let me know when you've got a product on market, when you get a proof of concept kind of a thing. And so we just, for years and years, we toiled. And I know Charlie was kind of the leader in trying to raise the money, and spent over 2 years before we even raised a single dime. And so that was pretty tough. And so over those years, we realized, all right, well, we've got to kind of scale our plans back. We got to figure something else out, because this is not the plan that's going to work. And so over that time, we figured out that not only is it a customary thing and a thing that just happens in the whiskey business to source product, and there are distilleries like we discovered back then, LDI, now it's MGP, that existed, but it also, the timing was actually really good, because around that same time, we kind of learned a little bit about Bellmead Bourbon, the brand itself. As it turns out, that was a brand that Charles Nelson never actually distilled on his own. He worked in conjunction with a third-party distillery who distilled it, and then he kind of helped, warehouse, bottle, and label and sell it, and kind of market it that way. And so it just kind of rolled into place. The timing was just right. That was like, okay, well, we can do that, because obviously sourcing whiskey, not building your own entire distillery, that's a lot less overhead than building your own whole distillery. So that plan ended up being what we had to go with, even if it wasn't our first choice. And so with that, we tried to stick to our guns, and like, yeah, we're sourcing product now, but it's always been our goal to still build the distillery and hopefully at some point bring all production in-house. And so that's kind of how that came to be and how we got started. Now, your second question was about the original recipe. So Charlie was kind of at the spearheading looking at state, city, county archives and historical documents and stuff. He found a handful of things, one of which was grain receipts. There were kind of grain receipts, tax documents, and then a newspaper article. So the grain receipts and tax documents showed us basically how much of which grains Charles Nelson was purchasing at any given time. And so we had an idea of like, okay, generally these percentages would add up to about XYZ mash bill, right? And then Charlie found this, so it was in the newspaper of, I believe it was the Daily American, or perhaps it was the Nashville Tennessean. Anyway, it was a newspaper. And back in the day, Charles would have basically a picnic on the 4th of July every year. And he'd kind of invite everybody, all the folks about town, politicians and friends and family and stuff. And
there was even record of folks coming down from Chicago to come to these events.
Yeah, it was a big thing. We got to maybe rent out a train car to get you guys all down here for our big shindig. And so, party barge maybe. So in this document, in this article, what happened was Charles's kind of right-hand man production lead guy would take people on tours of the distillery at the picnic. And so he, was taking his group on the tour, and he went into detail that you wouldn't believe. That'd be like, Charlie actually gets mad at me for going into even close to as much detail when I'm telling people on the production floor, like, this is how we make it. And so maybe for this very reason. But as it turns out, there was a journalist on that tour who ended up printing and publishing almost exactly how that, this is talking about down to the percentage of grains, that the number of bushels they'd make, the temperatures that they would cook their mash at, all these kind of very specific things about how they cook their mash. And so that gave us a whole lot. It confirmed basically what we thought the mash bill was, and then gave us even further idea of how best to kind of cook that mash and create that whiskey.
And that's really interesting, because I think in historical context, you don't think, because we're used to this now in the bourbon world, right? We know that there are a whole bunch of bourbon nerds who go from place to place to place, and that's all they want to know. What's the mash bill? How are you doing this, right? I guess you would never think in historical context that people, 80 years, 100 years ago would have really cared about it, but apparently they did. If it was important enough to be reported in a newspaper article. It's kind of interesting, because again, I guess you don't think that this nerddom around American whiskey goes back that far.
Yeah, well, I kind of think it's like, it just goes in phases. Probably shortly thereafter, it was like not so in vogue to be like knowing all of this stuff and be such a nerd about it. But that's kind of like, it's coming back now,
And it would have been shortly after Bottled and Bond, because what year was that? Was that article?
It was 1880s.
Okay, so before the Bottled and Bond Act. So really before the Bottled and Bond Act.
Yeah. And so there's a bunch of, I spent a couple of years in the Tennessee State Archives, going to county archives, and then the Robertson County History Museum and Archives. And I spent a lot of time. I would bring in like a pillow sack full of coins to go into the microfiche,
Right.
And Andy, that's probably why I could use some glasses now, but don't actually. Andy gives me shit all the time. He's like, you need to get glasses, because I'm the only one in the family that doesn't have glasses.
Yeah.
But yeah, so spent a lot of time just going through old newspaper articles, and we advertised in a lot of different newspapers pretty much like every day. And there were a lot of articles written about the distillery. I mean, it was by far the largest distillery in Tennessee. So prior to Prohibition, and it was known as Old Number 5 because it was registered Distillery Number 5, which on some of the stuff that you got, like some of the stickers and stuff, we got the historic designation of DSP, Distilled Spirits Plant, TN Tennessee 5, which we're really proud of. I don't know if you guys can see that. We've Andy's got on the coin, and that is like embossed on the bottom of the bottle here. But I mean, it was, I think there were roughly 1,000 distilleries in Tennessee prior to Prohibition, producing roughly 1.2 million gallons a year. And we were selling nearly 400,000 gallons a year. So roughly a third of the state's entire output was coming from Nelson's Green Brier distillery. So it was a big deal. And anyway, what I was saying is that there were articles written about it all the time. And I mean, we've actually found a couple different mash bills. There's the one that Andy's talking about, which is what we're using today, where they went through the process. Like first we grind up 103 bushels of corn and cook it to 212, whatever, probably more of the details than I do. Then cool it down and add in 28 bushels of wheat and so on and so forth. And which that brings up an interesting thing where we were using wheat. Which we found a little bit interesting because, I don't think any Tennessee whiskey, well, there may be now, but no other Tennessee whiskeys are using, big ones at least, are using wheat. Yeah. But it made sense because all around them, they were growing corn and wheat. So made sense.
Right.
And
actually, nobody would have been using wheat at that time, probably. Because who goes historically? I mean, Maker's Mark, Stitzel Weller, right? I can't think of anybody.
Maker's Mark wasn't even around then. I mean,
and Maker's Mark wasn't around until after Prohibition. 50s, so that's so you're right. You could have also ended up being one of the first people anywhere that were using wheat.
But it was just what was around, and we also had some orchards, made some apple brandy and peach brandy. Which we've got some cool old bottles of that, and
that's cool.
And we found another recipe or mash bill. I mean, Andy, it was a 4-grain with corn, wheat, and rye. I think wheat was the smallest element to that 4-grain. But that was another situation where it's like a visit to the prosperous concern of Nelson's Green Brier Distillery, where they mash twice daily, using X number of bushels of corn, Y number of bushels of rye, Z number of bushels of barley, and Q number of bushels of wheat, or whatever. I mean, I'm making stuff up, but that's the gist of the article.
W, X, Y, Z, and Q. Everyone knows that alphabet.
So I mean, you got the recipe. I mean, very close then. So what's the mash bill breakdown now? So, and not in bushels, because I don't do bushels.
We only talk in bushels.
Charlie, are you okay with saying this?
I mean, Brett and I have it still in the back of the office here. We're gonna copy it and rip it off, and we're gonna rebrand it. We're gonna sell it out for money.
So it's apparently not that rare of sort of not totally uncommon.
And so it's 70% corn, 16% wheat, and 14% malted barley.
Okay, that's a pretty standard. I mean, it's a little high on the barley, I suppose. Now,
there's nobody else nobody else says off the top of the head. I can't think of anybody else is doing that exact proportion.
That's a lot of wheat. I mean, that's more wheat than all except one other person.
Yeah, Larceny is the only other one.
Yeah, Heaven Hills wheat is 20%. So
the malted barley content, I thought was interesting being as high, but back in the day, they didn't have the enzymes as much that you need to,
Now, are you guys
at a higher malted barley content?
I mean, I wouldn't think you have to, but just for ease of use.
That's one of the really exciting things about it is that, it allows us, for that reason, it allows us to stick closer to the historic mash bill, and we don't have to use it. So we don't use any enzymes in this in the modern day either. So it's really good. And not only that, but like surely the malting processes are more efficient nowadays. Not to mention,
Right.
I mean, one thing that kind of gets lost in all of this that I find fascinating is that by the late 1800s, they still barely knew what yeast was, or like what that did. Like so it was like, of course, what they were making was going to be a lot less efficient. To be honest, probably a lot less flavorful. They just had a lot less control over everything. So
right, because you're right, because they would have had to have had. Was there any record of a family jug yeast, or was it possibly just spontaneous?
No, in fact, probably spontaneous, because we have them on our distillery, like in the tour path hall, ads where it says no, what is the exact wording, Charlie? It's like no yeast something,
no yeast added or something.
Yeah, which is really weird. So it's pretty clearly like a wild spontaneous fermentation.
And a 96 hour fermentation.
Oh, that's a long fermentation too.
Well, that makes sense too. But if you're going spontaneous yeast, that would make a lot of sense. Now it would take forever to get the thing moving.
Right. And then once it got moving, especially in the heat of summer, like you're going, and you're just fermentation's a day or two, and then you don't want it to go bad. So
life finds a way, as is the saying. So tell us a little more about the distillery now. I mean, back then, do you know if this was made on a pot still or if they were using a continuous still? And I mean, it was obviously they had a pretty large still, I would think, for that level of output that you're talking about the sales records for.
Yeah, big time. So we actually have, I wish I could share my screen, because we have, I wish I had it on my screen at all to share, but we have a copy of, on our production floor, the patent for improved distillation that Charles Nelson purchased in 1870 from a guy named Henry Kirk in Springfield, Tennessee, which is the neighboring town to Green Brier. And it shows, I'm not an engineer, so it was a little, took a while to like get the ins and outs of how it mechanically worked and everything. But what it amounted to was like a rudimentary column still. And I'm not terribly familiar with the coffee still.
The coffee still was 1830. So it wouldn't have been much after. Coffee still was invented in 1830 in Ireland.
Yeah.
So it also wasn't even in North America.
Yeah, from what I have been told, it was like somewhat similar to that. And so, but it was kind of like 4 or 5 different stacks of things together, 1 or 2 of which were columns, direct fired, of course. It's pretty cool. I am having trouble like vocalizing exactly what it was, but hey, plug to come to the distillery, and after the world gets back to normal, we're back on the production floor for tours. Come see that. It's a pretty cool diagram.
I'm looking forward to it. And my first shot yesterday. Looking forward to coming.
Yeah, nice.
We gave a copy of that patent to Rob Sherman at Vendome Copper and Brass, and asked him about trying to recreate that. And he was like, "Well, we could, but it'd probably be way more expensive than you want to pay, not as efficient, and a lot less safe." Like, I think there was a bunch of wood in there, and like, I mean, I'm not sure we would have gotten the approvals that we needed.
You certainly wouldn't have gotten any kind of efficiency that a bank would have been like, "Yep, I'm going to give these guys some more money."
Yeah.
So what's it made on now? I mean, it's made on a pot with like a column neck or something.
Yeah, we've got a 750 gallon pot column hybrid, 4 rectifying trays. And yeah. I mean, it's made at Vendome as well. We named it Miss Louisa after our triple great grandmother, Charles's wife, who, has a big part in the history as well. She actually, good segue. So after Charles died in 1891, Louisa was left to run the distillery, which she did. And she was one of the only women to run a distillery especially at that point in time. And, one of my favorite kind of parts about our history is this about Louisa, because, again, context around this time, she did not have the right to vote even, but here she is running the biggest distillery in the state of Tennessee. A business in the South being run by a woman in the first place is kind of incredible. The fact that she didn't have the right to vote, all these things kind of deck stacked against her kind of a thing, but she still kept the thing running and growing and profiting. And so when we were going through all of the archival information, all these documents and such, there wasn't a whole lot about Louisa. And one of the kind of aha moments that we had was when we came across her obituary. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it was like Louisa Nelson, born 1838, died 1918. Her husband did X, Y, and Z, and talked about Charles's accomplishments. And it was like, as much as we understood, those were the times, that didn't make it any less, frankly, insulting that it's like, here's this woman who did all these amazing things, but they don't talk about that. They just talk about what her husband did. And so that's something that we try to highlight a lot. I mean, and that's a reason that we named our still after her. And in fact, we have a big mural on the production floor of her kind of looking down on us. And we created a product in her honor, Louisa's Liqueur, which was not something that existed back in the day, but just something that we wanted to create to kind of honor her spirit. And it's a delicious coffee caramel pecan flavored liqueur. So we were excited about that. And then, also created an award in her name, the Louisa Nelson Awards, kind of lifting up certain Nashville area women who, have the kind of tenets of the award are achievement, vision, and inspiration. So each year we choose 3 women around the area, and each of the winners who embody those 3 tenets of the award, we donate money to charities of their choosing in their name. So trying to keep Louisa's name, put them back in the history books. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we should probably taste some whiskey before people start ditching us, huh?
Right.
So something that's worth noting is it's 91 proof because Charles Nelson passed away in 1891. Okay. And everything we do, we try and have a reason behind it. So
we figured 91 proof is better than 18 proof.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is labeled as Tennessee whiskey. So this is then Lincoln County charcoal filtered before it goes in the barrel for aging, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We take our, we'll yield about 110 gallons off the still, and immediately after collecting it in the tank, we'll filter it through that sugar maple charcoal. Mm-hmm. Probably takes 20 or so minutes for one batch to go through the process.
So we're not super aggressive with our charcoal mellowing. Yeah. And it's interesting though, because pre-mellowing, it's almost, the corn is almost like a little bit bitter, and then post, it's like, to me, a little bit more like buttered popcorn.
Yeah,
you're stripping nice. I mean, you're stripping fusel oil as part of that, so you're getting rid of that's all the phenolics and stuff in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the other things is that it's really the mouthfeel changes a good amount, and like you said, the fusel oils will have something to do with that, but also it's well, I guess those are really the 2 main things that I was going to say is before it's like a much kind of more viscous mouthfeel before, but it kind of cleans up the mouthfeel, changes it a little bit. So
have you barreled anything
full, though,
Yeah, have you barreled anything just as an experiment? Have you barreled anything without the charcoal filtration?
Yeah, I don't know that we've done much of this mash bill or any of it, because it's we're making this Tennessee whiskey, why not we want to do that, but we have done kind of somewhat experimental, but also sometimes like we make a rye whiskey. 1 week of every quarter we'll dedicate to production of rye, and we don't charcoal mellow that. And then a 4-grain Tennessee whiskey, like Charlie said, there was an old mash bill. We'll do that after, it's 1 or 2 batches of that. But we don't, I actually, now I'm getting confused. I can't remember whether we charcoal mellow that or not, but we've also done, corn whiskey. We've done a high malt whiskey, not a straight up malt whiskey, but various little bits and bobs. There's
well, you have a real flexible skill for experimentation with all those different styles of whiskey. I think it's pretty cool. It lets you maintain that kind of nimbleness of a craft distillery while you're still kind of putting out this what was a big brand at the time. So I mean, we're kind of launching this in Illinois right now. I saw a billboard on the highway the other morning. Where was this available before? It was just Tennessee initially, right?
Yeah, so we launched it October 1st of 2019, just in Nashville.
Okay.
And so October is not a good time to launch a new brand at all, really, especially not a new whiskey brand. But we're like, okay, we wanted to launch it the previous July, but we weren't quite ready. And so we launched it October 1st, 2019. And then we were getting ready to go into new markets in like April of 2020. So we were just getting ready to launch in, the rest of Tennessee and then a couple other markets, and the world shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So we did end up still launching in, Chattanooga, Memphis, and Knoxville, and then South Carolina and Kentucky. So just kind of bordering states. So the plan was to just start building out around Tennessee and go within like a 500-mile radius, essentially. So Illinois is one of the first states that we're launching in, and we're super excited. Like, I'm pumped to have billboards in Chicago, or at least a couple. I mean, it feels really good, and so we're trying to make a big push and spending some money in the market, and we just got into Illinois within the last few days, or couple weeks at least.
We have had it. We're very pleased with the results thus far. Yeah, we've had it for a week, and we've sold a very, very nice chunk.
Yeah,
good.
Well, it's good whiskey though.
And I think it's
it's properly priced too. I think a lot of times now with a lot of craft distillers, we get 2-year-old whiskey that costs $80 or something, and isn't particularly as mature and flavorful as people are looking for. This is a really, really great whiskey, and we're selling this for $30. I mean, it's
awesome.
Yeah, usually, and this is unusual because normally you go the opposite. We kind of have a sliding scale where you kind of assume that rye really seems to come to maturity a little bit quicker, if for no other reason than rye is very good at covering up aging flaws, because there's so much spice in rye. If you have a little bit of a green wood element, it just seems like it's part of the spice rather than coming through. But for the age, you really don't have any kind of green wood on this at all, given the fact it's not super old. Because typically it takes, 3 or 4 years before that, if it's going to be present, before that burns off.
Yeah.
Well, one of the keys to that is so the label says it's at least 2 years old, and of course it is at least 2 years old, but in fact, that label is still from 2019. So at this point in time, everything that we have in the bottle is at least 3, and by the end of this year, we'll be bottling nothing younger than 4 years old. At that point, we will be sure to change the label to remove that age statement.
Yeah.
And so as far as the price goes, like when we started this business, we didn't really know about craft whiskey or micro distilleries or anything. Really, there were maybe a dozen distilleries in the country making whiskey that we knew of, and we were going around to all the distilleries in Tennessee and Kentucky that we could meet with, and pretty much all of them were willing to meet with us. And one of the smallest distilleries that we went to was George Dickel, and we were like, oh, we'll just build a distillery like this size. That's pretty small. And we didn't realize that it's not that small. But we also, like, when we were first starting on this in 2006, I mean, I think I remember seeing like Pappy on the shelves for like $70-$80 or something like that. And like the fact that it was even on the shelves, and we're like, oh my gosh, people would pay $80 for whiskey. Maybe we could get people to pay $30, and So, but we've always kept that in mind. Like we want it to be, back in the day, it was one of the largest and most popular brands in the country. So we wanted to put out a good, solid product at an affordable price so that people could have, you know, a good quality product, maybe a step up from what they're used to drinking on a regular basis, and make it as, you know, attainable as possible. I mean, we did, when we first came out, there were people saying like, oh, why aren't you charging more? It's like, well, we want to put out a good product at a good price. We're not trying to price gouge or anything, and we want to spread it far and wide. And by the way, Andy, did you talk about the column still at all?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so a few years ago, we realized like our plan is to build another much larger distillery, right? And to have a big column still. So we realized, okay, if we're gonna go from a hybrid pot and column still to a big column still, there might be some flavor drift, then we want to prepare for that. So we did, like 3 years ago, engage another distillery with a column still, one that it doesn't have like a big brands or anything that you would know about, to help, you know, produce from our mash bill, you know, using our barrels, using like the grains from the farmers that we're getting them from, using our, you know, standard operating procedures and everything to help sort of supplement that. And so currently it's about 25% of that column still distillate and 75% of our pot still distillate. And then once we build out, you know, and are distilling all on our own column still, it'll, you know, slowly over time.
Yeah, it's not a drastic
well, that's
change.
that's another distillery in Tennessee.
Correct. Yeah.
They're and right, and you're right. There are no brands there are brands associated with it, but they do a good job. I mean, I'm sure you're comfortable you're getting good distillate from them, because the other things that they've produced that are out there are very good.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Andy and the production team are, you know, working hand in hand with them. So
we're old pals.
So what proof does this go into the barrel for aging? And like what kind of barrel are you using? Is it toasted? What's the char number?
So this
from the cooperage we've heard of.
Yeah, so it even further back downstream or upstream from that, we actually pull it off the still at 125 proof, which is a little bit lower than most.
Yeah.
Goes into barrel at 115.
Okay.
We're going into Kelvin Cooperage heavy toast number 3 char.
Nice.
So, and well, I guess one further detail that Charlie's talking about the column still is that, and I mentioned earlier, it's like everything is at least 3 years old at this point, even if the label only says 2. The 3-year-old, like Charlie said, it's about 25% from that other distillery, the blend. That's what the 3-year-old in this is. The rest is 75% of our own distillate that's closer to 4 and 5 years old at this point.
Some even probably
I don't know if we're getting to 6
years old. Or
I don't know
close.
if we put any 6-year-old in the blend. I think some of that, I think a lot of this stuff, like, so the oldest barrel that we currently have, like our first barrel that we ever filled of our own distillate, was August 16th, 2014. So we're coming up on, oh my God, really? 7, I guess? That's insane. Okay, I haven't said that out loud in a while. We'll be 7 years old. And so a lot of the very oldest barrels that we have, we're trying to kind of hold back to keep those, you know, for a good long while, and, you know, save something.
So we just, speaking of that, we just got a question, and we'll show a bottle from one of our regular watchers and good friends, Michael Nolan, asked if he said he's enjoying a glass of the first 108, and he is lobbying for us to get samples so we can do some Benny's picks. And we do. Charlie, you gave me this.
Yep. I have a bottle of that at my house. Charlie, you sent them to us, and I never opened mine. It's just still sitting down in my basement with my other bottles.
Yeah, so the first one.
So we got batch 5.
Ooh, nice.
I got batch 3.
Oh, ours is worthless.
It's okay.
Might be worth something someday. So that was just a one-off sort of thing. So we like when we first started, we thought like we bought 108 30-gallon barrels, and our original plan was we were going to start, releasing some 2-year-old 30-gallon barrels and then get into the 4-year-old in 53-gallon barrels. And then we were like, the flavor profiles, just different. It's the same mash bill, everything. The only difference is the barrels, but it's just different. And so we're like, okay, what are we going to do with this? We should brand it differently, only sell it at the distillery. And so we're like, okay, what's the significance? It was in, it was what, 2017, I think. And so that happened to be like, we were talking, the Cubs had just won the World Series. Actually, yeah, this is how it came about, because we're like, oh, the Cubs just won the World Series. It's been 108 years since they won the World Series. And then we're like, wait a second, 108 years ago, that was 1909 when we shut down because of Prohibition.
And you had 108 barrels, so you caused the Cubs to win the World Series.
Exactly.
I mean, I personally wouldn't want to be associated with those pathetic losers, but I mean, it's your company, not mine.
So good. If you see, we won't even start with this outside. By the way, this is really nice.
Yeah. So we're just like, okay, 108 barrels, 108 years, Nelson's first 108. So we had a small batch version and a single barrel version. So we sold those just out of the distillery, and they're all gone. But as for your question about single barrels, at this point we don't have any plans to do anything aside from just this, the sort of classic Green Brier Tennessee whiskey. But we're talking about, the two ideas, Andy, I don't know if this is okay to say, but the two ideas that we've tossed around, and who knows when we'll decide on it, but we've tossed around, thought about single barrel, thought about barrel bottled in bond. But right now we're just trying to build the base and get this launched and focus on this first. And then once we kind of build that foundation, then we'll get going. I can tell you, I know that there are some killer barrels out there. Ooh, Andy, you want to tell them about that one barrel?
Oh wait, you can't talk about this if we're not going to get them.
Oh, this is no one in the world will get this except for, like, I don't know, me and Charlie maybe. But there was this barrel that was like I almost, honest to God, hesitate to say anything publicly, because it's like it's almost unbelievable. So we had this one day we were tasting, and this was about, I guess, 2.5 years ago. We had our warehouse manager, Jeremy, go around and like pull samples from all the barrels that were like newly 4 years old. And there was this one that he found that was on the top row, meaning for us, it's just the third tier up. But it had also been sitting for the majority of its life on our production floor. We had this wall of barrels, 3 barrels high, right in the path of our exhaust fans, like just pulling air through the facility at all times. So he took a sample of it and realized, he told us, he was like, hey guys, there's very little whiskey left in this barrel. Do you want to come check it out? It's super dark. So we went and checked it out. Very, very dark. I mean, but still brown. It wasn't like black dark, which is not a good sign for a whiskey, but incredibly dark. Like, it smelled like, you know how when you'll smell like a stag or something, when it's like the 145 proof or whatever, the crazy, it's just like, it smells unbelievable, but you can tell how kind of thin and like spiritus it is. It's amazing. So it had that nose and that aroma. Tasted it, it was like, it was totally magical. I mean, it was really unbelievable for a 4-year-old whiskey. I mean, it was like 4 years and 1 day, literally. And we knew there was very, very little left in that barrel. So we said, okay, let's dump this barrel out and save this spirit, because any longer, and it's just all going to evaporate. So we got to save what we can.
There's what, 6 bottles maybe?
I think, 6 or maybe 8 bottles or something like that.
What did it regauge out at? What did it regauge out at?
Do you want to take a guess?
I mean,
guess.
We've the hottest we've ever gotten, which was an actual live sample, which was actually tolerable, was 80.1, so 160.2 proof.
Yeah,
I would guess it was over 100. I would guess between 141 and 140.
150, yeah.
Okay, this was 167.
Holy,
I think 0.1 proof. We could not believe it, and this was not like manual gauging. This is like, $20,000 piece of equipment, density meter that we paid for, that we use every day, and it's very exact. So we did that. We gauged it out like 6 or 7 times, and it was the same thing every time. I think the lowest reading we got was like 166.8 or something, but 166 proof. This is why I hesitate to talk about it, because I'm like, I don't know if people will actually believe me, but it was just completely unbelievable. And it was so fantastic, so delicious, but I'm almost certain it's only because it was like, maybe that barrel had, a little bit more of a hole in it or something, and it would have evaporated sooner anyway. But like the fact that it was for probably 3.5 years of its life, probably 8 or 9 feet off the ground, directly in the path of like aggressive airflow. Unbelievable.
Well, it's a good excuse to talk about the awesome barrels you're buying. Brett and I are big fans of Kelvin Cooperage. So audience listeners, Kelvin Cooperage is very much a handmade cooperage, and all of their barrels are toasted and charred, not over just like a propane flame on an assembly line. They use they're burning chunks of oak that are trimmed from the barrels they're making, and they burn those, and that's how they toast and then char these barrels. And it has a character to it that I think you can't really get otherwise. And it's like you can tell a Kelvin barrel a lot of times when you're tasting a whiskey. It's just got that toasty, marshmallowy quality to it that I think is really just gorgeous, and it definitely shows in the whiskey. That's cool.
Yeah, big time shout out to Kelvin. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is really an interesting thing that they do, where they don't use the propane flame, the gas flame. I mean, they use the natural, flame from the oak itself. And that's just like, I don't know. I don't know if they've ever used the term organic when you're talking about an organic whiskey barrel, but that's like, if you're going to apply it to a whiskey barrel, it may be for Kelvin when you're talking about
I think that counts as natural, but not organic. Sure.
Yeah, that works. But it really does make a difference. And by the way, also shout out to, frankly, any cooperage. If you ever have a chance to go visit a cooperage, such a cool tour. And it's like, it smells like a bakery. It looks like some medieval dungeon with all the flames and like weird tools and equipment. It's a very cool thing to see.
All right, we got a couple questions. Mitch really wants us to explain what the phrase bottled in bond means. That is a law from 1897, realistically, the world's first food safety law. We had a lot of whiskeys at the time with a lot of junk thrown in them, whether that was flavoring or coloring or fruit extracts and stuff. And so it's really it's a purity law. There's 4 things that have to be done to a whiskey to call it bottled in bond. It has to be made by one distiller in one distilling season. It's got to be aged at least 4 years in a government bonded warehouse, and it has to be bottled at 100 proof. And that's it. So it's kind of an old timey thing that's being brought back by, there's a lot of demand from consumers for bottled whiskeys.
And bear in mind, there's been a lot of in its age. Again, Pat said it the best way, because you go back to the history of when your great grandfather would have started this distillery. Mm-hmm. It was truly the wild west in terms of quality control and what people would do to stretch out and get as much money as they could without, it's expensive to make whiskey. It's a lot cheaper to put other crap in it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it truly bottled in bond really means something. And it really changed the whiskey world in terms of perceiving American whiskey to be, good or excellent.
And our other question from Carol Farino, I have no idea how to answer this at all. Is there any way for Cooper's Club members to have allocated bottles held when they become available? This would be for out-of-town members. Carol, send an email to those guys. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Carol also has a friend who just bought a case of Louise's too.
Yes.
Ooh, nice.
Based on our conversation.
Hell yeah. Yeah, Louise's is killer.
Charlie, this
yeah,
question's all you.
As far as the Coopers Club goes, so I would send I'm guessing that you are a member of the Coopers Club, and so we're still, it's still a new organization or club, but I guess, is Carol coming on to?
No, I think I don't know if I accidentally. Carol, you have speaking privileges now if you want to let us know.
Well, it's really not Carol, it's really Ken.
Oh, well, you spelled Ken wrong.
Also, I'm here too.
So are you a member of the Coopers Club?
Yeah, and when you just had that last release, what was that, about 2 weeks ago?
The vanilla cask.
Yeah, I tried and tried and tried every way possible. And they just wouldn't hold the bottle, because the problem was I had people who were willing to come, but they couldn't just leave work and go. But, I was willing to, pay for it. It's just hard when you're out of town. I'm calling from Peoria, and to get someone to drop what they're doing and run over there to pick it up. We have people in Nashville who are willing to do that, but it's hard for them to get there before it runs out.
Totally. So the Coopers Club was designed, for, the intent was, to get folks who are, big fans, loyal consumers of our products and everything, and give you sort of, one, to reward you and give you special opportunities at some of our special releases. Mostly our Craftsman cask collection, which we try and do quarterly releases of those. That's like, we've done the Movedra cask, the Black Bell, the Honey, and then sort of a rotating one. And so those are where we're giving sort of, first access and to the Coopers Club. There are, I know it gets a little confusing, but there are some like gift shop drops that we do. For example, the vanilla was one of those, which was like an experimental cask that we did finish in a vanilla extract cask. And we've got a couple others that we may release. We're not totally sure, but those are kind of outside of the Coopers Club. Those are sort of experimental things that we don't know when or how we're going to release those. And I know it's similar but different. And I don't know if I've clarified anything really.
It's all right.
We're also
small production one-offs. I mean, the obvious solution, I think, to all those problems is to just send them all to Binny's Beverage Depot. I think would make the most sense. But
and we can make sure to take care of the Freenos that we will make, that some will go to Peoria.
Yeah, but yeah, Ken and Carol, I don't know. We want to try to keep it focused on this one for now, I guess. So email Charlie though for more questions.
Yeah, I mean, but we're trying to clarify the Coopers Club ourselves and kind of figure out how that's going to bear out and what specifically the perks are going to be and how we deal with that, because there's really so many logistics.
It's cool that people that you have, like, even for just one-off experiments, you guys have seen such a high demand for. So I mean, kind of on that note, do you plan on expanding the portfolio on the commercial level? I know we're talking about this awesome Tennessee whiskey and we all agree this is great. I mean, kind of what's next for Nelson's Green Brier then as far as distribution goes?
So, I mean, we're expanding the Nelson's Green Brier Tennessee whiskey into a handful of new markets, mostly, within like a 500-mile radius of Nashville. We're still chugging along with Belle Meade bourbon. It's now distributed nationally, pretty much all 50 states, but the focus there is on the classic Belle Meade and the reserve Belle Meade. And we've got a handful of just sort of experimental projects in the works, but I mean, this is what we started the company for. Mm-hmm. Belle Meade was a bridge to get us to Nelson's Green Brier. And so, I mean, I'm just so excited to have this out here. I mean, this is like it took us 13 years to get to the starting line with this. And everything that we've done up until this point has been trying to get us here. And now we're just, so excited to have it. And that's where all of our energy and focus is going. And so we want to just get this out, grow it, and we'll kind of see how things go from here. We don't really know, to be honest.
I will say
this is going to be our flagship.
Yeah, we also we do try to, for anybody who can at some point, like it doesn't have to be, the minute we announce a gift shop drop and get there in an hour, it's going to be sold out. Of course, those will happen from time to time, but we also do try to keep some unique things in the gift shop kind of at all times, whether it's I don't know what it could be, something unique that you can't get anywhere except for the gift shop. We try to keep at least one of those in rotation on the shelves in the gift shop at all times, so that if you do come to Nashville, you can at least leave with something that you couldn't have gotten anywhere else.
That's cool.
Did you say Canella cask?
Vanilla. So
okay, because I say Canella, it's like I've never heard of a cinnamon cask before.
Oh no, that's interesting though. I don't know how you would go about getting one of those, or if that even exists. But but the vanilla cask is something that I thought the same thing about, or rather didn't think anything about it. We didn't know there's this broker who will kind of collect or come up with barrels that, whether it's wine barrels or different finishing casks, and kind of put out a blast to those who know them. And they found there was some commercial producer of vanilla extract who ended up buying, a truckload or something of bourbon barrels and aging their vanilla extract in that for some time. And when they dumped it out, they put those barrels back on the market. And so that was just really an interesting idea to me. And so we bought one of them. We bought one barrel and tested it out. And it turned out to be, sorry, I don't mean to rub it in anybody's face who couldn't get it or anything, but it was one of my favorite ones, because I'm just like, call me boring, but vanilla is like one of my favorite, most appealing flavor profiles. And it happens to go quite well with a whiskey. That's one of the natural kind of flavor profiles of a barrel aged spirit. And so it just went over really well. We aged it we finished it in, I want to say, Charlie, was it an 8-year-old bourbon? Is that right? I can't remember. That was finished in vanilla extract cask for not even that long, maybe a few months.
It's not exactly a subtle flavor, so I wouldn't assume it would have to be there that long.
Right.
Yeah. So it was really interesting, but things like that come along, and we just kind of we got to snap it up if we can and see how it goes. So
sounds like more good candidates for a single barrel program. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. And we've done, Andy, did we do what did we do? We did some hickory cane corn. Did we make corn whiskey with that, or did we make some Tennessee whiskey with it?
We did our Tennessee whiskey with it. We found
just a few batches, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2 batches. A farmer in East Tennessee had this hickory. It's this heirloom variety of corn. It's a white corn called hickory cane. And supposedly it's much larger kernels and sweeter, at least in food. It tastes a lot sweeter. And so we were really curious to see how that happened. As a matter of fact, I tasted that yesterday with Ed. It was, I think it was 4 years old. And I think we have 2 or 4 barrels of it. Pretty interesting. Not what I would have expected for a corn that when you eat that kind of corn or make food products with it, it's a lot sweeter. In the whiskey, it wasn't necessarily that much sweeter. It was more of almost a cinnamony or a more baking spice profile than straight up sweetness that you would think you get with a different corn. Pretty cool though.
Yeah, usually something like that, food corn, you almost don't, or food corn like that is almost too sweet. If you have too high of a sugar, you need some balance in there. You can't have a sugar content that's completely crazy. You have to have some protein and some acid that just balances it out.
Yeah, we're gonna let that sit for another probably another couple years in the barrel. But it was fun. It's cool to try.
Did we end up doing anything with the Jimmy Red corn?
No, No, we should.
We don't
We
need.
could
Sorry,
still-
I been meaning to ask you about that.
All the
we
weird
don't need to
varieties
do
of
that in a
corn.
public forum.
All the
Oh,
weird
I don't
varieties
know.
of corn are
We're
interesting.
kind of interested to see what anything else you're getting, because heirloom corn right now is, enough people are doing heirloom corn and coming up with excellent results. I mean, we're right in our backyard. Our friends at Whiskey Acres, of course, are on a large corn farm, so they grow all their own, and they've done some fantastic experiments that have turned into great bottlings with all kinds of different heirloom. So it's certainly worth your time if you have the still time. I think that you'd keep doing it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, and
I
the
agree.
long-term goal is, once we get another bigger distillery, is to have the distillery that we have currently as just like an experimental sort of facility where we can just do a lot of different fun stuff that, good time.
All right. Well, guys, thanks a lot for joining us today. I know it's kind of been an hour here, but this whiskey's awesome. I mean, I'm glad to finally see it in Illinois. It's just a great whiskey, and this is, I think it, punches well above its weight. Audience, it's one of the best $30 you can spend in the store right now for sure. So, guys, really appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, Charlie, there's one real quick, because we were just the last question. Charlie, do you remember going to a vice versa dance with Cornelia?
Yeah, Cornelia Rowe.
Yes, Cornelia R.
Where did
So
that,
in
how
the
did
world's
you
of
know
small
that?
worlds, we'll say it because that was from our friends, the Frinos. Just asked one of my son's roommates in LA was Cornelia Rowe from Nashville. She said she asked you to a vice versa dance in high school.
Yeah, I haven't seen Cornelia in a long time, but
And now you got to get them a vanilla bourbon, man. See,
yeah,
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
All
Small
right,
world.
we'll try to dig up more high school stories the next time we have you on, Charlie.
Uh-oh.
Well, while we're in
He
the
knows
chat
we're
panel,
relying on you for that.
while we're in the chat panel, we miss you too, Mike Novi.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Yeah. No, Mike
Love you,
is
Mike.
Mike is around for us, is a big supporter and sits in on a lot of these sessions we do.
He's a good man. Can't wait to see y'all, and still gotta get back on. I guess the Preds are sucking this year. The Blackhawks are,
Punching above their weight, man.
The Blackhawks are all of a sudden, trust me, and I was
Hockey team
grumbling under my breath for the last 2 years.
Anyway, enough hockey
I was-
talk. This has been really great.
Charlie,
Baseball
that's the
season
next
there.
time of the tasting. Remember, we're gonna have full crowds in October when 2021 starts. So
Oh, really?
yeah, we'll have full when the next season starts. We're not having anything right now.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
We'll get this one out of the way.
we got Vegas Golden Knight fans on now too.
Yeah, you
All right,
know
so,
what?
enough of this hockey talk. So Charlie and Andy, thank you for joining us. Audience, thank you for joining us. Thanks for all the great questions. Brett and I will be back 3 times next week, I think. We'll be back on Monday talking American Brandy. We'll be back on Wednesday with West Cork Distillery in Ireland.
John O'Connell from West Cork.
And then maybe not next Friday, but either way, check out binnies.com/virtual events. Charlie, Andy, thank you guys so much. Everybody, cheers. Have a good evening. Enjoy your weekend. I'm going to
Thank you so much.
Whiskey.
Appreciate you having us. Can't wait to see y'all again in person.
Happy Friday.
Absolutely. All right, guys.
See you next time, guys.
Cheers.